Hello and welcome to Hardman Talks. I'm Larissa Adams and I'm with Hardman Co's Renewables analyst, Nigel Hawkins. Hi, Nigel. It's good to see you. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much. And certainly within the UK energy sector, exciting times.
Right. Okay, that's a good start. We're excited to hear from you because I know you've got some thoughts on the whole sector and what we can expect in 2025. So I guess let's dive right in. So is the UK's energy policy now driven by net zero targets?
There's no doubt that net zero targets, which under the Labour government are rather stronger than those of the preceding Conservative government, are instrumental in determining energy policy going forward. Of course, it may change because net energy zero does mean some very aggressive investment, which may or may not be forthcoming. So I suspect over the next few years, we will see change in generation with much more of an emphasis on renewable energy, whether it's from offshore wind, possibly onshore wind, and of course, some nuclear power coming on stream. Hinkley Point C is currently being built, but there's going to be a real problem in financing future nuclear power investments. So a lot of things to decide.
Thanks, Nigel. And does fossil fuel generation in the UK belong to history?
Yes, on the coal front, which powered Britain for years and indeed decades, that is now unlikely to be restored. The emission problems of coal are very difficult. What I think we will see is continuing investment in gas power plant. Yes, in the last few years, gas has been very difficult to use because of the very high cost caused partly by the invasion of Ukraine. But there's no doubt that big gas-fired plants are very efficient and are very competitive, assuming the gas input costs are not excessive. I think also we will see more investment eventually in nuclear power, despite the very major costs involved. After all, the Hinkley Point investment is costing of the order of £40 billion, and that is obviously a very heavy cost for any government or indeed major investor to bear.
Yeah, of course. So given the recent well-publicized power shortages, how important is the output from gas-fired plants?
I think it's very important. We have seen, certainly in recent months, the scenario of very low wind speeds, very cold weather. And at that time, the big investment in renewable energy has limitations. And that's why gas-fired plant is so important to bridge that sort of gap. Yes, nuclear is very important as well, but nuclear power output over the next few years will probably fall as further stations are closed down. Bear in mind, something go back right to the 1980s. So trying to sort out that problem, gas is going to be very much central to it, because the last thing any politician wants is power cuts. And you have to go back to the 1970s when there were quite a lot of power cuts. But these days, particularly with IT, transport system and so forth, power cuts really are a no-no.
And is renewable generation now the future, do you think?
I think we are increasingly going to see more and more renewable generation, and most European countries are going down a similar route. I think it's going to be far more wind, onshore wind. Offshore wind requires considerable investment, but it does have a number of advantages and big output. But you also do have to have major investment in transmission links to connect offshore wind plants up to the system in the UK. I think we will see more interconnectors. The problem with interconnectors, apart from their cost, is that if the UK has got a really cold period, shall we say, in a December or a January or a February, it's quite likely that other countries, Germany, France, or whatever, have got a similar scenario. So that the idea that through interconnectors you can just order power at short notice when you want it is probably somewhat illusory.
Right. And should we expect major investment in new nuclear plants?
I think we will see new investment. Hinkley Point is the key one for the moment, because it says halfway through, near 2/3 of the way through construction. For additional plants, I think it's more likely, apart from really big plants, that we may end up going down the route of the smaller nuclear units. The problem with that is they're still very much on the drawing board in terms of design and would require several years, I think, of approval by the Nuclear Installations Inspectorate, and they'll see that they're absolutely safe. But nuclear modules, much smaller ones, are likely to be able to produce good nuclear power output without the massive investment required of a successor to Hinkley Point, or indeed some of the other nuclear power stations of the past.
And do you think there is sufficient grid capacity to achieve this energy transformation?
I think it can be done, but first it requires very, very big investment. Secondly, the regulatory regime would have to be organised so that companies investing were certain of a very good and solid long-term return. Otherwise, frankly, they won't invest. They'll decide we might as well invest elsewhere. And thirdly, you will need major investment, particularly by National Grid, to improve transmission links, which in the UK are very much designed around the coal-fired power station of the 1960s, rather than the current renewable plants, many of which are in remote areas and away from the central part of the grid. So a lot of expenditure involved, a lot of planning issues involved, and massive investment required. Put that lot together, and you could see a very different energy situation 10, 15 years down the line.
Thanks, Nigel. And lastly, do reefs such as Greencoat UK Wind, do they stand to benefit from this switch?
I think so, yes. In theory, certainly any wind generator would expect to do pretty well out of the current regime, and indeed looking forward. And Greencoat UK Wind actually has virtually all its plants in the UK and in wind. So to that extent, it's pretty well placed. Some of the other technologies far more tricky. Tidal has been pushed for years, wave power has been pushed for years, but really renewables initially is about onshore and offshore wind. Apart from hydro, we've had hydro plants for years, so that is somewhat different, but really renewable going forward means big investment in wind.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Nigel. It's been great getting your views on the sector. To our viewers, if you'd like to read Nigel's full notes on the sector, head over to our website. The link is in the description below. Otherwise, please do like and comment on the video wherever you're watching. Every piece of engagement really does help. And please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next time.